They say money talks, but in the case of Thanos Blackwood, it didn't just talk, it screamed. He thought the world was his playground, and everyone in it was just a prop for his amusement. On a rainy Tuesday in Manhattan, inside the city's most exclusive restaurant, he decided to play a game with a quiet, exhausted waitress. He threw a check for $500,000 on the table and dared her to speak a language he was sure she didn't know. He expected her to cry. He expected her to beg. But when she finally opened her mouth, Thanos Blackwood didn't laugh. He stopped breathing. Because she didn't just speak the language. She spoke a secret that was supposed to be buried in the desert 20 years ago. This is the story of how a billionaire bought his own destruction for exactly $500,000. The rain in New York City doesn't wash the streets clean. It just makes the grime slicker. It was a Tuesday night in November, the kind of night that chills you to the bone. But inside L'Argent, the temperature was perfectly controlled at 68 degrees. L'Argent wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of solitude for the 1%. There were no prices on the menu. If you had to ask, you were already being escorted out by a security guard named Rocco, who had knuckles the size of walnuts. The walls were lined with velvet, the lighting was dim enough to hide affairs, but bright enough to catch the sparkle of diamonds, and the air smelled of truffles and old money. In the center booth, the King's Corner, sat Thanos Blackwood. Thanos was 42, though his face carried the smooth, chemically peeled tightness of a man trying desperately to be 30. He was the CEO of Blackwood Dynamics, a defense contracting firm that had made billions reconstructing the very cities that war had destroyed. He was loud, he was handsome in a shark-like way, and he was currently drunk on a bottle of 1982 Petrus. "I'm telling you, Liam," Thanos boomed, ignoring the hushed atmosphere of the room. He swirled the wine in his glass, risking a stain on the pristine white tablecloth. "It's all about leverage. Everyone has a price. You just have to find the currency. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's fear, sometimes—" He paused, grinning at the young model sitting to his left. "Sometimes it's just access." Liam Seeking, a junior partner at a hedge fund who clung to Thanos like a remora fish to a shark, laughed too loudly. "You're terrible, Thanos. Absolutely terrible. But you're not wrong." Thanos leaned back, spreading his arms along the banquette. He wore a bespoke suit that cost more than most people's cars. On his wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch, ticking away seconds that were worth thousands of dollars in interest alone. "Watch this," Thanos whispered, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the floor. He wasn't looking at the food, he was looking at the staff. Coraline was moving through the dining room with the practiced invisibility of someone who knows that being seen is dangerous. She was 34, but her eyes looked 50. She had high cheekbones and dark, deep-set eyes that were currently fixed on the tray of crystal glasses she was balancing. Her uniform was crisp, black and nondescript. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun that pulled at her scalp. She was tired. Not the kind of tired you get from a long day at the gym or a late night out. She was tired in her soul. Her feet throbbed in the cheap shoes she'd bought at a discount store in Queens, and her mind was doing frantic arithmetic. Rent is due in 3 days. Mom's medication is $200. If I pick up a double shift on Friday, I can maybe buy groceries. "You there?" Thanos snapped his fingers. The sound cracked through the ambient jazz music like a whip. Coraline froze. She took a breath, composed her face into a mask of polite servitude, and turned. "Yes, sir? Can I get you anything else?" "My glass is empty," Thanos said, gesturing to the crystal goblet that was still a quarter full. "Of course, sir." Coraline stepped forward, reaching for the bottle of Petrus. As she poured, Thanos watched her. He didn't see a person. He saw a variable. He saw something to test. He noticed the slight tremor in her hand. Exhaustion? Fear? It didn't matter. It amused him. "You have an interesting look," Thanos said, his voice loud enough that the neighboring tables turned to watch. "Where are you from?" Coraline didn't look up from the pour. "Queens, sir." Thanos let out a bark of laughter. "Queens?" No. Before Queens. Your eyes. The structure of your face. You're not just from Queens. What is it? Persian? Arab? Israeli?" Coraline finished pouring. She set the bottle down with a soft clink. "I'm American, sir." "Boring," Thanos groaned, looking at Liam. "See?" No imagination. They forget their roots the second they put on the uniform. He turned back to Coraline, his eyes glinting with a malicious idea. He had had a bad week. The SEC was sniffing around Blackwood Dynamics regarding some contracts in the Middle East, specifically regarding the reconstruction of a sector in Aleppo. He needed to feel powerful. He needed to win something, even if it was small. I spent 10 years in the Middle East, Thanos lied. He had spent 10 years in air-conditioned hotels in the Middle East, never touching the sand. I know the look. You've got the Levant written all over you. Coraline took a step back, clutching her serving tray against her chest like a shield. Is there anything else, sir? I'll make a bet with you, Thanos said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried across the silent room. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. It was a heavy, leather-bound book. He uncapped a gold fountain pen. Thanos, don't, Liam giggled, clearly loving it. You're going to scare her? Nonsense. I'm going to change her life. Thanos scribbled furiously. He ripped the check out with a flourish and slammed it onto the table. The number was staggering. $500,000. Coraline looked at the check. It was more money than she would make in 10 years. It was freedom. It was her mother's health. It was a life without the crushing weight of debt. 500 grand, Thanos announced. It's yours, all of it. I'll sign it right now. The manager can witness it. The restaurant had gone silent. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. The sommelier paused in the shadows. Everyone was watching the billionaire and the waitress. What do I have to do? Coraline asked, her voice barely a whisper. Thanos leaned forward, his breath smelling of expensive wine and decay. I know you people come here, you forget your heritage, you try to blend in. It's pathetic. I want you to speak Arabic, just one sentence. Prove to me you haven't whitewashed yourself completely. Speak Arabic fluently, right now, and the money is yours. He leaned back, crossing his arms, a smug grin plastering his face. He was betting on a certainty. He had profiled her. To him, she was just a second-generation immigrant who probably only knew how to say hummus and falafel. He wanted to humiliate her for her lack of culture, to prove that he, the white billionaire, knew more about the world than she did. And if I can't? Coraline asked. Then you get on your knees, Thanos said, his eyes cold, and you clean my shoes with your apron. Right here, in front of everyone. The room gasped. It was cruel. It was unnecessary. It was Thanos Blackwood in a nutshell. Coraline looked at the check. Then she looked at Thanos. The room seemed to stretch, the silence ringing in her ears. Thanos laughed. Cat got your tongue, or did you leave it in Queens? He didn't know who she was. He didn't know that Coraline Jenkins wasn't her real name. And he certainly didn't know that 10 years ago, in a dusted-out bunker in the Syrian desert, their paths had almost crossed, and that she had been listening to every word he said back then, too. To understand why Coraline stood frozen, staring at the check, you have to understand the noise in her head. For the last 5 years, Coraline had lived a life of aggressive mediocrity. She chose the night shifts. She wore no makeup. She rented a basement apartment with poor ventilation because it meant no one would ever look for her there. She paid her bills in cash whenever possible. She was hiding. Thanos Blackwood saw a waitress, but the woman standing before him was formerly Captain Coraline Sadie Mitchell, one of the US military's most gifted linguistic intelligence officers. She didn't just speak Arabic, she spoke Farsi, Pashto, and 3 dialects of Kurdish. She could tell you which village a man was from by the way he pronounced the letter Qaf. She had spent 4 years listening to wiretaps, translating interrogations, and negotiating with tribal leaders in active war zones. She had left the service with a dishonorable discharge and a sealed file. A scapegoat. 5 years ago, a reconstruction project in a conflict zone had gone wrong. Money intended for schools and hospitals had vanished. A local contact, a man Coraline had recruited and promised to protect, had been found executed. When Coraline tried to blow the whistle, showing that a private contractor had embezzled the funds and leaked the contact's name to a militia to cover their tracks, the evidence disappeared. Coraline was painted as unstable, paralyzed by PTSD, a liar. She was stripped of her rank and her clearance. The contractor walked away with millions. That contractor was a subsidiary of Blackwood Dynamics. She hadn't seen Thanos' face in the flesh back then. He was just a signature on the documents she had tried to expose. He was the man in the high castle. But she knew the name. God, she knew the name. Now he was sitting 3 feet away from her, taunting her with the very blood money he had stolen from the people she had tried to save. "Well," Thanos prodded, tapping the tablecloth. "I'm waiting. The offer expires in 60 seconds. Tick-tock, Cinderella." Liam snickered. "She doesn't know it, Thanos. Look at her. She's probably Spanish." "I'm giving her a chance," Thanos said magnanimously, raising his hands to the room as if performing for an audience. "I am a philanthropist. I am trying to reconnect this poor girl with her roots." Coraline felt a cold heat rising in her chest. It started in her stomach and wrapped around her throat. It was the same feeling she had when she was in the field, the seconds before an IED went off. The hyper-awareness. She looked at the check again. $500,000. It could pay for her mother's heart surgery. Her mother, who was dying in a state-run facility because Coraline couldn't afford the specialists. Her mother, who didn't know why her brilliant daughter was waiting tables. "Swallow your pride," a voice in her head said. "Just speak, say something generic. Assalamu alaikum. Take the money. Run." But then she looked at Thanos' shoes. They were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. He wanted her to kneel. He wanted to break her because he thought she was already broken. He thought this was a game. He thought language was just sounds you made to order dinner or command servants. He didn't know that for Coraline, language was a map of scars. She remembered the man she had promised to protect. His name was Khalid. He had been a teacher before the war. He had trusted her because she spoke his dialect. Not the formal Arabic of the news anchors, but the rough, warm dialect of his hometown near the border. The last recording she had ever translated was a phone call Thanos Blackwood had made to his field manager. She had never been able to prove it was him. The voice was distorted on the recording, but she knew the cadence. She knew the arrogance. On that tape, the voice had said, "Burn the paper trail. If the teacher talks, make sure he never speaks again. I don't care about the cost. Clean it up." Khalid was dead 2 days later. Coraline looked up from the check. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to drop away, leaving only the sound of Thanos' heavy breathing and the ticking of his expensive watch. Her hands stopped shaking. Her posture changed. She didn't stand like a waitress anymore. She stood like a soldier. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. The exhaustion melted from her face, replaced by a terrifying, icy calm. Thanos noticed the shift. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. The air between them grew heavy, charged with static. "You want me to speak Arabic?" Coraline asked. Her voice wasn't the soft, subservient murmur she used for customers. It was clear, resonant, and commanded the space. "That's the deal," Thanos said, though he leaned back slightly, unsettled by the sudden intensity in her eyes. "Fluently. Impress me." Coraline took a step closer to the table. She didn't look at the check. She looked directly into Thanos' pupils. "There are many dialects, Mr. Blackwood," she said. "Egyptian, Maghrebi, Levantine. But I think you might remember a very specific dialect. The dialect of the Euphrates Valley, specifically the region around Deir ez-Zor." Thanos' face went slack. The color drained from his cheeks so fast it looked like a magic trick. Deir ez-Zor. That was where the ghost projects had been. That was where he had made his first 100 million. "What?" he whispered. Coraline didn't smile. She didn't blink. She opened her mouth and the words came out, not as a waitress speaking to a customer, but as a judge delivering a verdict. She spoke, and the restaurant froze. The silence in L'Argent was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for cathedrals or bomb disposal units. Even the kitchen clatter seemed to have ceased, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Coraline stood tall. The slump of the overworked waitress had vanished, replaced by the rigid spine of a woman who had once stood in a dusty tent and stared down warlords. She looked at Thanos Blackwood, whose smug grin was beginning to tremble at the edges. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She spoke with the low, melodic, and terrifyingly precise cadence of the Deir ez-Zor dialect, a specific rural variation of Syrian Arabic that almost no foreigner knew, let alone an American waitress in Manhattan. إذا المعلم حكى تأكد إنه ما بيرجع يحكي مرة تانية. إحراق الأوراق نظيف الفوضى. The words hung in the air like smoke. For 99% of the people in the restaurant, it was just sounds. Guttural, rhythmic, foreign sounds. Liam, the hedge fund junior, blinked his eyes, looking back and forth between Thanos and Coraline with a dopey grin, waiting for the punchline. But for Thanos Blackwood, it wasn't just language. It was a ghost story coming to life. His hand, which had been resting near his wine glass, jerked spasmodically. The crystal goblet tipped over. The dark red 1982 Petrus flooded across the white tablecloth, spreading like an arterial wound. It dripped onto his expensive Italian trousers, but he didn't move. He didn't even blink. He was staring at Coraline as if she had just pulled a grenade pin with her teeth. Those were his words. They were the exact words he had spoken into an encrypted satellite phone 7 years ago. He had been standing on the balcony of a hotel in Dubai, 3,000 miles away from the murder he was ordering, feeling like a god. He had said those words to authorize the execution of Khalid, the local schoolteacher who had found the discrepancies in Blackwood's accounting. If the teacher talks, make sure he never speaks again. Burn the papers. Clean up the mess. Thanos's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. How? It was impossible. The connection had been secure. The recording had been destroyed, or so his head of security had promised. That? Thanos choked, his voice a dry rasp. What did you say? Coraline watched the wine drip onto his lap. She felt a cold, dark satisfaction uncurl in her chest. She had waited years for this. She hadn't planned it. Fate had delivered him to her table, but she knew exactly how to play it. She turned her gaze to Liam and the other diners who were leaning in, desperate to know what the waitress had said to stun the billionaire. Mr. Blackwood asked for fluency, Coraline said, her voice switching back to English, smooth and professional, though carrying an edge of steel. I recited an old, local saying, from the region where his company did so much good work. She looked back at Thanos, her eyes bored into him, stripping away the layers of wealth and arrogance until only the frightened man remained. Would you like me to translate it for your friends, sir? Coraline asked innocently. Thanos's face went from pale to a blotchy purple. No, he hissed. You, it's beautiful poetry, Coraline continued, addressing the table. Roughly translated, it means, if the teacher speaks, ensure he is silenced forever. Burn the evidence, clean the mess. A gasp rippled through the nearby tables. It sounded violent. It sounded like a mob hit. My God, Thanos, Liam laughed nervously, pulling his napkin away from the spreading wine stain. That's grim. Is that really a saying over there? It's very popular among certain circles, Coraline said, never breaking eye contact with Thanos, especially among men who think money makes them invisible. Thanos felt the room spinning. He needed control. He needed to stop this immediately. He was Thanos Blackwood. He didn't get cornered by help. You're lying, he sputtered, standing up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. That's gibberish. You're just making sounds. Coraline didn't flinch. She reached out her hand, her fingers steady, and placed 2 fingers on the check that was still sitting in the center of the wine-stained table. The deal was simple, Mr. Blackwood. Speak Arabic. Fluently. I did. And unlike you, I honor my contracts. She slid the check toward her. Thanos's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. The contact was electric. The restaurant went dead silent. Touching the staff was the cardinal sin, even for billionaires. But Thanos was past caring about etiquette. He was in survival mode. He squeezed her wrist hard, his nails digging into her skin. Who are you? He growled, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that only she could hear. Who sent you? The feds? A competitor? You tell me right now, or I will bury you so deep they'll never find you. Coraline looked down at his hand gripping her wrist. Then she looked up at his face. She didn't pull away. She didn't cry out. She smiled, and it was the most terrifying smile Thanos had ever seen. Careful, Thanos, she whispered back. You're making a scene, and you know how much you hate paper trails. The air in the restaurant was thick enough to choke on. The maître d', a thin Frenchman named Claude, was rushing toward the table, his face a mask of panic. He could see the billionaire gripping the waitress's wrist. He could see the spilled wine. He smelled a lawsuit. "Monsieur Blackwood," Claude exclaimed, hovering nervously. "Is everything all right?" "Coraline, what have you done?" Thanos didn't look at Claude. He didn't let go of Coraline's wrist. His eyes were darting rapidly, searching Coraline's face for a clue, a wire, a camera, anything. "She's a thief," Thanos lied, his voice loud and shaky. "She's trying to hustle me." "I fulfilled the terms of the wager," Coraline said calmly. She twisted her wrist. It was a subtle movement, a technique she had learned in basic training. Rotate against the thumb, leverage the radius bone. Thanos yelped in pain and released her. He stared at his hand, flexing his fingers, shocked by the sudden, sharp agony. A waitress shouldn't know how to do that. Coraline picked up the check. She held it up to the light. $500,000. "You can cancel it, of course," Coraline said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "You can call the bank in 5 minutes and stop payment. But if you do, everyone here will know that Thanos Blackwood's word is worthless, that he makes bets he can't cover." She looked around the room. She saw the cell phones out. People were recording. "And," she added, lowering her voice so the cameras wouldn't catch it, "but Thanos would. If you cancel this check, I go to the New York Times tomorrow. And I won't just quote your phone call, I'll tell them exactly where the bodies are buried in Sector 4. I know about the well, Thanos. I know about the old schoolhouse." Thanos froze. The blood drained from his face completely. The schoolhouse. That was where they had taken Khalid. "You," Thanos stammered. He looked like he was having a stroke. "You're the Mitchell girl, Captain Mitchell." He remembered her name now, the intelligence officer who had filed the report. The one they had discredited. The one they said was crazy. "I'm just a waitress, sir," Coraline said dryly. "Coraline Jenkins, from Queens." "Rocco!" Thanos screamed. From the shadows near the entrance, the mountain of a man named Rocco materialized. He was 6'5", ex-mercenary, wearing a suit that struggled to contain his shoulders. He had been watching, waiting for the signal. Rocco plowed through the tables, knocking a chair aside. He arrived at the table in 3 strides, positioning himself between Thanos and Coraline. "Problem, boss?" Rocco rumbled. "She threatened me," Thanos said, pointing a shaking finger at Coraline. "She assaulted me. Get that check back, now." Rocco turned to Coraline. He loomed over her, blocking out the light. He cracked his knuckles. To him, she was just a twig, a nuisance. "Hand it over, sweetheart," Rocco said, extending a hand the size of a catcher's mitt. "Don't make me break your fingers." The diners gasped. Someone shouted, "Hey, leave her alone." But nobody moved. They were rich, not brave. Coraline looked at Rocco. She assessed him in less than a second. Right-handed, heavy on the left foot. Overconfident. Center of gravity is too high. She sighed. "I really just want to finish my shift, Rocco." "Check, now." Rocco grabbed for her shoulder. It happened so fast that the cell phone cameras barely caught it. As Rocco's hand clamped onto her shoulder, Coraline didn't pull away. She stepped into him. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, a precise, devastating strike to the nerve cluster. As he doubled over, wheezing for air, she swept his lead leg and guided his massive bulk down to the floor. It wasn't a bar fight brawl, it was efficient. It was military. Rocco hit the ground with a thud that shook the floorboards. He lay there, gasping, clutching his chest, unable to inhale. Coraline stood over him, smoothing her apron. She looked back at Thanos. Thanos was backing away, bumping into the table behind him. He looked at his bodyguard on the floor, then at the woman he had tried to humiliate. He realized with a dawning horror that money couldn't help him right now. He was in a room with a predator, and he was the prey. "Keep the money," Thanos whispered. He was terrified. "Just keep it. Leave me alone." "It's not about the money, Thanos," Coraline said softly. She folded the check neatly and placed it in her apron pocket. "It's about the bill coming due." She turned to the stunned manager, Claude, who was hyperventilating near the dessert cart. "Claude," Coraline said politely, "I think I'm going to resign effective immediately. I'll leave my uniform in the locker." She turned to walk away, but she stopped. She looked back at Thanos one last time. "Oh, and Mr. Blackwood." Thanos flinched. The SEC investigator looking into your files. Agent Miller? Coraline smiled. He's my brother-in-law. I think he'd love to hear my translation of your poetry. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked through the silent restaurant. The diners parted for her like the Red Sea. She walked with her head high, the check burning a hole in her pocket, leaving the billionaire shaking in a puddle of spilled wine. But as she stepped out into the cold New York rain, Coraline knew this wasn't the end. Thanos Blackwood was a wounded animal now, and wounded animals were dangerous. She pulled her phone out. She didn't call her mum. She didn't call the bank. She dialed a number she hadn't used in 5 years. "It's me," she said when the line clicked open. "I've been compromised. But I have the funding. We can start the operation." She hailed a cab, vanishing into the city lights. Back inside, Thanos was pulling himself together. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, murderous rage. He pulled out his phone. "Get me the team," he snarled into the device, ignoring the stares of the people around him. "I don't care if it's in the middle of Manhattan. I want her gone. Tonight." Thanos Blackwood didn't leave L'Argent through the front door. He was escorted out the back kitchen exit by 2 security guards, shielded from the paparazzi who had already begun to sniff around the front entrance. Rumors fly fast in New York, and Billionaire humiliated by Waitress was a headline that would sell. He threw himself into the back of his armored Maybach. The leather seat, usually a comfort, felt like a coffin. He poured himself a whiskey from the car's crystal decanter, his hands still trembling with rage. "Get me Garrison," Thanos barked at the driver. "He's on line 1, sir." Thanos snatched the phone. "Garrison, I have a situation." Garrison was the head of Blackwood Dynamics' Special Projects Division. In the annual report, they were listed as risk management consultants. In reality, they were a hit squad composed of ex-SAS and dishonorably discharged Navy SEALs who didn't mind getting their hands dirty for a 6-figure salary. "I'm listening, Mr. Blackwood." Garrison's voice was like grinding gravel. "A woman, Coraline Jenkins. She's a waitress at L'Argent. She just walked out with $500,000 of my dollars and a head full of classified intel. She's Mitchell. Captain Coraline Mitchell, the one from the Aleppo file." There was a pause on the line. "I thought she was neutralized 5 years ago." Pish Eval said she was catatonic. "Well, she just broke my bodyguard's ribs," Thanos screamed, losing his composure. "She's awake, Garrison. And she's active. She threatened to go to the Times. I want her gone. Tonight. Make it look like a mugging gone wrong. A overdose. I don't care. Just make sure she never speaks to a reporter." "Consider it done. We'll track her phone." "She's smarter than that," Thanos warned. "She's one of yours. She knows the playbook." "Everyone makes mistakes, sir. We'll find her." Coraline did not make mistakes. As soon as the taxi turned the corner onto 5th Avenue, she asked the driver to pull over. She handed him a $50 bill. "Keep the meter running for 10 minutes, then drive to Grand Central," she said. She hopped out into the rain before he could argue. She didn't go to Grand Central. She dove into the subway station at 53rd Street, blending instantly into the crowd. She removed her hair tie, letting her brown hair fall around her face. She pulled a crumpled grey hoodie out of her oversized purse, her go-bag that she brought to every shift, and slipped it on over her uniform. She took the battery out of her primary phone and dropped it into a trash can. She was a ghost again, but she needed to be a ghost with teeth. She rode the E-train to Queens, her eyes scanning the reflection in the window, watching the passengers. No one was following her yet. Garrison, she knew Thanos would call Garrison, would be triangulating her old phone signal. By the time they realized the phone was in a trash can in Midtown, she would be miles away. She got off at a stop in Long Island City, an industrial area full of warehouses and new high-rise condos. She walked 3 blocks to a 24-hour self-storage facility. She punched in a code, 102499, the date her father died. Inside Unit 404, there was no furniture, just a single heavy Pelican case and a sleeping bag. Coraline opened the case. Inside wasn't money. It was equipment she had slowly siphoned away over the years, bought on the dark web or stolen from surplus stores. A scrambler, a clean laptop, a Glock 19 with the serial number filed off, and a stack of files. She sat on the cold concrete floor and opened the laptop. She didn't hack into the Pentagon. She logged into her bank account. She took the check Thanos had written, the check for $500,000. She pulled out her burner phone, took a picture of the check, and initiated a mobile deposit. Processing. She wasn't doing it for the money. She knew the check would clear. Thanos had too much pride to bounce it, and stopping payment would leave a paper trail of admission. She was doing it for the metadata. As soon as the deposit hit the banking servers, an alert would trigger on Thanos's private finance team's dashboard. They would see the IP address of the deposit. She was intentionally pinging her location. "Come and get me," she whispered. She stood up, checked the magazine in the Glock, and tucked it into the waistband of her Waitress trousers. She grabbed the Pelican case and left the storage unit. She didn't run. She walked 2 blocks west to a construction site that had been stalled for months. A giant sign on the chain-link fence read, "Future home of the Blackwood Tower." Luxury living, it was one of Thanos's vanity projects. A 40-story skyscraper that was currently just a skeleton of steel and concrete, abandoned due to union disputes. Coraline cut the lock on the fence with bolt cutters from her case. She slipped inside. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the construction site into a mud pit. The wind howled through the steel girders of the unfinished tower. It was a dangerous, dark, and lethal playground. It was perfect. She climbed the service stairs to the 3rd floor. She found a spot with a clear line of sight to the entrance gate. She set up her position. Then she waited. 30 minutes later, 2 black SUVs rolled silently down the wet street. They killed their headlights a block away. The hunt was on. Garrison was a professional. He didn't rush. He sat in the passenger seat of the lead SUV, staring at the tablet in his lap. "Signal originated here," the tech in the back seat said. "IP traces to a cell tower right above us. She's close. Likely within a 2-block radius." Garrison looked at the abandoned construction site. He saw the cut lock on the gate. It was sloppy, too sloppy for someone like Mitchell. "It's a trap," Garrison said, his voice void of emotion. "Should we pull back?" the driver asked. "No." Garrison checked his weapon, a silenced MP5. "She's one woman with a pistol and a Waitress uniform. We're a 6-man team with thermal imaging and body armor. Trap or not, the math is on our side. We go in. Clean sweep." The 6 men exited the vehicles. They moved like water, silent and fluid. They activated their night vision goggles. The world turned green and grainy. They moved through the gate. Up on the 3rd floor, Coraline watched them. She didn't have night vision. She didn't need it. She had prepared the battlefield. She picked up a handful of heavy steel washers she had found on the floor. She threw one hard against a metal sheet on the opposite side of the floor, 30 feet away from her. Clang. The sound echoed through the empty concrete skeleton. Below, the team froze. 3 of them swung their weapons toward the sound. "Contact up high. 3rd floor," one whispered into his comms. "Split up," Garrison ordered. "Team Alpha, take the east stairs. Team Bravo, take the west. Pinch her in the middle." Coraline smiled in the darkness. They were doing exactly what the manual said to do. She moved. She didn't run away from them. She ran toward the west staircase, keeping low. She knew the layout of this building better than they did, not because she had been here before, but because she had studied the blueprints. This building was the subject of the lawsuit she had been reading about for weeks. She knew the west stairs had a structural defect on the landing between the 2nd and 3rd floors. She heard the heavy boots of Team Bravo thundering up the stairs below her. She stopped at the landing. There was a stack of loose cinder blocks left by the masons. She pushed the stack. It wasn't a cartoonish avalanche. It was a calculated obstruction. The blocks tumbled down the stairs, crashing into the shins and knees of the lead mercenary. "Man down!" a voice shouted. In the confusion, Coraline leaned over the railing and fired 2 shots. She didn't aim to kill. She aimed for the legs. Bang, bang. 2 screams echoed in the stairwell. The acoustics of the concrete amplified the sound, making it impossible to tell where the shots came from. Team Bravo was stalled, dealing with injuries and confusion. "She's on the west stairs," the radio crackled. "Team Alpha, push, push," Garrison yelled from the east side. Coraline was already moving. She sprinted across the third floor, jumping over a gap in the floor where the elevator shaft was supposed to be. It was a 6-foot leap over a 4-story drop. She landed on the other side, rolling to absorb the impact. She was now flanking Team Alpha. They came up the east stairs, scanning the darkness, expecting her to be pinned on the west side. Coraline stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. She was 10 feet behind Garrison. "Drop it, Garrison," she said. Garrison spun around, raising his weapon. Coraline was faster. She didn't shoot him. She shot the fire extinguisher mounted on the temporary wooden wall right next to his head. The tank exploded. A cloud of white chemical powder erupted, filling the hallway. The mercenaries, wearing night vision goggles, were instantly blinded. The sudden flare of white powder in the amplified light of the goggles was like staring into the sun. They ripped the goggles off, coughing, blinded by the dust. Coraline moved in. She used the butt of her pistol, striking with ruthless efficiency. A blow to the temple, a kick to the knee. Within 10 seconds, 2 men were on the ground, unconscious. Garrison, half-blinded, swung his MP5 wildly. Coraline ducked under the barrel, stepped inside his guard, and jammed the muzzle of her Glock under his chin. "Freeze," she commanded. Garrison froze. The white powder settled around them like snow. The rain pounded on the concrete roof above. "You've lost a step, Mitchell," Garrison wheezed, wiping his eyes. "You should have killed me." "I'm not a murderer, Garrison. That's the difference between me and Thanos." She reached into Garrison's tactical vest and pulled out his secure phone. She saw the active call. Thanos was on the line, listening. Coraline put the phone to her ear. "Are you listening, Thanos?" she asked, her breathing heavy but steady. Silence on the other end. Then a shaky voice. "What do you want? 5 million? 10? I'll give you anything." "I don't want your money," Coraline said. "I deposited that check to bring your dogs here, to show you that your walls aren't high enough. Your men aren't good enough." "Coraline, please." Thanos sounded desperate now. "We can work this out." "We are working it out," Coraline said. "I'm sending you a video." "What video?" "The video from the helmet camera of your lead man here," Coraline said, bluffing. "It's streaming to a cloud server, and it shows your private hit squad attacking an unarmed woman on US soil. If anything happens to me, if I trip on a sidewalk, if I get a cold, if my mother has a bad day, that video goes to the FBI, along with the Aleppo files." "You have the files," Thanos whispered. "I have everything," Coraline lied. She had some files, but not the smoking gun. But Thanos didn't know that. Fear filled in the blanks. "Call them off," Coraline ordered. "Now." "Garrison." Thanos' voice came through the phone, tinny and terrified. "Stand down. Let her go. Do not engage." Garrison, blood trickling from his nose, nodded slowly. "Copy that." Coraline stepped back, keeping her gun trained on Garrison. "Tell Thanos one last thing," Coraline said to Garrison. "What?" "Tell him the waitress is quitting. She's going into management." Coraline backed away into the shadows of the construction site. She reached the fire escape and descended into the rainy night. She had won the battle. She had neutralized the threat for tonight. She had $500,000 pending in her account. But as she walked away, adrenaline crashing through her system, she knew this wasn't over. Thanos Blackwood wouldn't stop. He was scared now, which made him dangerous. He would regroup. He would find a way to circumvent the blackmail. She needed to finish this. She needed to cut the head off the snake. She walked to a nearby diner, went to the bathroom and cleaned the grease and blood off her face. She looked in the mirror. Coraline the waitress was gone. She pulled out her burner phone and dialed a number. "Did you get the trace?" she asked. Loud and clear, a male voice answered. It wasn't a mercenary. It was Agent Miller, her brother-in-law at the SEC. "When you deposited that check, it pinged the account. We traced the funding source. It's not coming from Blackwood Dynamics. It's coming from a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The same shell company that paid the bribes in Syria." Coraline smiled. The trap hadn't been the construction site. The trap had been the check. "We have the link," Miller said, "but we need the physical ledger to prove intent. We need to get into his penthouse." "I know," Coraline said. "I'm going to a party tomorrow night." "What party?" "The Blackwood Charity Gala," Coraline said, watching the rain streak the diner window. "I hear they're looking for catering staff." The Blackwood Annual Charity Gala was the kind of event where the flower arrangements cost more than an average American mortgage. Held in the tri-level penthouse of the Blackwood Tower, the only completed section of the building, it was a swarm of senators, oil tycoons, and celebrities, all drinking champagne and pretending to care about global infrastructure. Thanos Blackwood stood on the balcony of the 50th floor, looking down at the city. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He looked calm, but his eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't slept. He had tripled his security details. Garrison was gone, fired and in hiding after the failure at the construction site. The new team was Israeli private security, the best money could buy. Every entrance was monitored. Every staff member had been vetted. Thanos felt safe. The check Coraline had deposited had been flagged as fraudulent by his lawyers this morning, freezing the funds. He had spun a story to the bank about a stolen checkbook. He was winning again. Down in the kitchen, the catering staff was in chaos. "We're short on champagne flutes on the terrace," the head caterer shouted. "You, new girl, run these up." Coraline Jenkins took the tray. She wasn't wearing her diner uniform this time. She was wearing the crisp white jacket of the high-end catering company she had infiltrated 3 hours ago. Her hair was different, blonde wig, contacts changing her eye color to blue. She had passed the background check because Emily Vance was a real person, a former contact of hers who was currently backpacking in Peru and didn't mind lending her identity for a night. Coraline walked through the double doors and into the lion's den. The room was dizzying. Chandeliers dripped crystal. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner. Coraline moved through the crowd, offering champagne, but her eyes were scanning the room. She wasn't looking for Thanos. She was looking for the library. According to the blueprints and the thermal scans Agent Miller had provided, Thanos's private server, the physical drive containing the unredacted ledgers of the Syrian bribes, was air-gapped. It wasn't connected to the internet. To get the data, you had to physically plug in. The library was guarded by 2 men. Coraline adjusted her earpiece. "Miller, I'm in position. Is the distraction ready?" "Stand by." Miller's voice crackled in her ear. He was parked in a surveillance van 3 streets away. "Initiating in 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, the fire alarm didn't go off. That would be too cliché, and these systems were too advanced. Instead, the smart home system controlling the penthouse went berserk. The lights in the main ballroom strobed violently. The sound system blasted heavy metal death metal at maximum volume, drowning out the string quartet. The automatic blinds began to open and close rapidly. Panic. The guests screamed, spilling drinks. "Technical malfunction," Thanos shouted, waving his arms. "Get the engineers." The 2 guards at the library door looked at each other, confused by the chaos. One of them tapped his earpiece, trying to hear over the deafening music. He stepped away to find a quiet spot to communicate. That left one. Coraline didn't hesitate. She dropped her tray. The sound of shattering glass was lost in the noise. She walked straight up to the remaining guard. "Sir," she shouted, pointing at the ceiling, "the sprinklers are about to trigger. The antique books." The guard looked up instinctively. Coraline didn't use a fist this time. She used a taser she had strapped to her thigh under her skirt. She jammed it into his side. He seized up and collapsed silently into the deep carpet. She dragged him inside the library and locked the heavy oak door. Silence. The soundproof walls cut off the chaos outside. She ran to the desk. There it was, the server tower disguised as a humidor. She pulled a USB drive from her pocket, military-grade, loaded with an extraction worm. She plugged it in. "Accessing 10%, 20%. "Come on," she whispered. The door handle jiggled. Then a heavy thud. Someone was throwing their shoulder against it. 40%. "Open the door." It was Thanos's voice. Coraline looked around. No exit. The windows were sealed. 60%. The wood around the lock splintered. 80%. The door flew open. Thanos Blackwood stood there, a silver pistol in his hand. Behind him were 2 new guards. "I knew it," Thanos sneered, stepping into the room. He looked at the progress bar on the computer screen. He laughed. "You're persistent, Coraline. I'll give you that." He walked over and yanked the USB drive out of the computer. "Download failed," he mocked. He threw the drive on the floor and crushed it with his heel. Coraline stood with her back to the desk. She looked trapped, defeated. "It's over," Thanos said. "No more games, no more bets." He raised the gun. "You can't shoot me here, Thanos," Coraline said, her voice shaking slightly. "There are 300 witnesses outside." "They're busy running from the noise," Thanos smiled. "And besides, this room is soundproof." "I'll say you were an intruder, a terrorist. I defended myself. I'm a patriot, remember?" "You're a traitor," Coraline said, her voice hardening. "You sold out your country for profit. You killed Khalid. You killed innocent people." "Business is messy," Thanos shouted, his veneer cracking. "You think I wanted to kill the teacher? He was a liability. He was going to ruin a $1 billion contract over a few missing crates of medical supplies. I did what was necessary. I ordered the hit because nobody else had the stomach for it." Coraline stared at him. "You admit it?" "I admit I'm a winner," Thanos yelled, the adrenaline making him reckless. "And you're a waitress. Nobody cares about you. Nobody will miss you." He cocked the hammer of the gun. "Goodbye, Coraline." Coraline didn't flinch. She just pointed to her chest, not at her heart, but at the top button of her catering jacket. "You're right, Thanos. The download failed." She smiled, "but the upload worked perfectly." Thanos frowned. "What?" "The button," Coraline said. "It's a camera and a microphone, connected to a 5G transmitter." She tapped her ear. "Miller, did we get that?" Clear as day, Miller's voice boomed, not in her ear, but over the library's intercom system. "Confession recorded, admissibility guaranteed." Thanos's face went white. He looked at the intercom. "Who is that?" he whispered. "Federal agents," a voice shouted from the hallway. "Drop the weapon, now!" Thanos spun around. The hallway wasn't empty. It was filled with FBI agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn. They had used the chaos of the malfunction to breach the penthouse while the private security was distracted. Thanos looked at the gun in his hand. He looked at Coraline. For a second, he considered raising it. "Don't," Coraline said softly. "You'll ruin the suit." Thanos Blackwood dropped the gun. It hit the floor with a dull thud. As the agents swarmed him, cuffing his hands behind his back, he looked at Coraline with pure hatred. "You're nothing," he spat. "You're a servant." Coraline walked past him as they dragged him out. She leaned in close so only he could hear. "And you, Thanos," she whispered in perfect, fluent Arabic. "Anta al-Mahdi. You are the past." She walked out of the library, past the stunned guests, and into the night. 6 months later, the trial of Thanos Blackwood was the trial of the century. The audio recording of his confession in the library was the nail in the coffin. But the files Coraline had recovered, Miller had managed to seize the server before Thanos's lawyers could scrub it, provided the rest of the lumber. Thanos was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder. Blackwood Dynamics was dissolved, its assets seized to pay reparations to the families in the Syrian sector. Coraline didn't go back to the diner. She sat on a park bench in Central Park. It was a sunny spring day. Next to her sat an older woman in a wheelchair, her mother. "Look at the birds, Sadie," her mum said, smiling. Her color was better. The surgery had been a success. "They're beautiful, Mum," Coraline said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a letter. It was from the Department of Defense. Regarding Captain Coraline Mitchell, status, discharge upgrade to honorable, security clearance reinstated. Full back pay authorized. It wasn't millions of dollars, but it was enough. It was her name back. "Are you going to take the job?" her mom asked, eyeing the letter. The CIA had been calling. They needed Arabic speakers. Real ones. Coraline looked at the skyline. Somewhere in that concrete jungle, there were other Thanoses. Other men who thought money made them gods. "I don't know," Coraline said, folding the letter. "I was thinking of opening a school. A language school." "Oh?" Her mum smiled. "What would you call it?" Coraline thought about the desert. She thought about Khalid, the teacher who died for the truth. "The Khalid Academy," Coraline said, "where we teach people that words matter." She took a deep breath of the fresh air. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't a waitress. She wasn't a ghost. She was Coraline Mitchell, and she had the last word. And that is the incredible story of how one arrogant dare cost a billionaire his entire empire. Thanos Blackwood thought that money was the only language the world understood. But he learned the hard way that the truth speaks louder than any checkbook. Coraline proved that integrity, skill, and the courage to stand up to power are worth more than $500,000. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets us know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. What would you have done in Coraline's shoes? Would you have taken the money and ran, or stayed to fight? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.